The beginning of a strange journey. Hello my friends. Today, I will tell you a story that can change the way you look at life. It is the story of a man who was not born rich. He was not born famous. He was not born powerful. But one day, the whole world would know his name. His name was Steve Jobs. Steve was born in San Francisco, California, in 1955, but his life started with pain. His biological parents were not ready to raise him, so they gave him up for adoption. A kind couple, Paul and Clara Jobs, adopted baby Steve. Paul was a mechanic. He fixed cars. Clara was a bookkeeper. They were not rich. They were simple people. Steve grew up in a small house. He had no idea that one day he would change the world. A curious child. As a child, Steve was different. He asked too many questions. He wanted to know how things worked. When other kids played outside, Steve often opened radios, TVs, and machines just to see what was inside. His father, Paul, taught him how to work with his hands. Paul showed him how to take apart an engine, how to use tools, and how to build things. Steve loved it. He learned that the inside of things must be as beautiful as the outside. This lesson stayed with him forever. At school, Steve was smart, but also a troublemaker. He got bored easily. He did not like following rules, but he had a sharp mind. Teachers saw that he was special. A dreamer in high school. When Steve became a teenager, he loved electronics. He also loved pranks, jokes, and pushing boundaries. But there was one thing about Steve. He was not afraid to be different. In high school, he met another boy, Steve Wozniak. Wozniak was a genius with computers. He could design circuits and build machines that no one else could. The two Steves became friends. They laughed together, dreamed together, and started small projects. They loved creating. They didn't know it yet, but together, they would change history. College and the search for meaning. After high school, Steve went to college. But college was expensive. His parents spent their savings, but Steve didn't like the classes. He felt lost. After only one semester, Steve dropped out. He stopped attending regular classes, but he stayed around campus. He slept on friends' floors, collected bottles to buy food, and walked miles to get free meals. But here's the beautiful part. Steve followed his curiosity. He took classes that he loved, like calligraphy. He didn't know how it would help him. But years later, that knowledge gave the world beautiful computer fonts. Sometimes, in life, the things that look useless today become the most important tomorrow. Steve's story proves that. Apple is born. In 1976, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak started working on a computer. They wanted to make computers small, simple, and personal. At that time, computers were huge machines, only for companies or scientists. They built their first computer in a garage. Yes, a garage. The place where cars usually stay became the birthplace of a revolution. They called their company Apple. Why Apple? Steve said he liked the name because it was simple, friendly, and not scary like other computer companies. The Apple II computer became a big success. Suddenly, Steve Jobs, the adopted child, the college dropout, became a young millionaire. He was only 25 years old. The rise and the fall. Apple grew fast. But Steve was not an easy man to work with. He was demanding, emotional, and sometimes very difficult. He wanted perfection. He wanted beauty. He wanted magic. Not everyone could understand him. In 1984, Apple released the Macintosh. It was the first computer with a mouse and beautiful graphics. It was revolutionary. But inside the company, problems started. Steve had conflicts with other leaders. Finally, the unthinkable happened. Steve Jobs was fired from his own company. Imagine that. He built Apple. It was his baby. And now, it was taken away from him. He was only 30 years old. The world thought he was finished. learning from pain. Being fired broke Steve's heart. He felt lost, embarrassed, and angry. But later, he said it was the best thing that ever happened to him. Why? Because it gave him freedom. He started new adventures. He built a new computer company called Next. He also bought a small animation studio called Pixar. Pixar would later create Toy Story and many more famous movies. Without Steve Jobs, there would be no Pixar magic. Sometimes, life pushes us away from what we love, but maybe it is preparing us for something even bigger. The Return of the King. Years later, Apple was struggling. The company that Steve started was near death. So, Apple decided to bring him back. When Steve returned, everything changed. He cut unnecessary projects. He simplified the company. And then, he started creating products that the world had never seen before. First came the iMac, then the iPod, then the iPhone, then the iPad. Each product changed the way people lived. Each one was simple, beautiful, and powerful. Steve had returned, and he made Apple the most valuable company in the world. The vision of Steve Jobs. Steve was not an engineer. He was not the best at coding, but he had vision. He could see the future. He knew what people wanted before they knew it themselves. He believed that technology was not just about machines. It was about people. It was about making life better. He said, "Design is not just how it looks. Design is how it works." He also said, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." This meant, never stop learning. Never stop dreaming. Never think you know it all. The final battle. Steve Jobs had everything. Money, fame, success. But then, life gave him the hardest challenge. Cancer. In 2003, doctors found that Steve had pancreatic cancer. He fought bravely. He had surgeries and treatments, but the disease kept coming back. Even when he was weak, Steve continued working. He continued dreaming. He continued leading Apple. In 2011, at the age of 56, Steve Jobs passed away. The world cried. Millions of people felt they had lost a friend. The legacy. But Steve Jobs is still alive, not in body, but in spirit. Every time you hold an iPhone, use a MacBook, or watch a Pixar movie, you touch his vision. His life teaches us, you don't need to be born rich. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't even need to finish college. What you need is passion, courage, and the belief that you can change the world. Steve once said, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life." So, my friends, remember his story. Learn English with it, but more importantly, learn life with it. Be curious, be different, and never be afraid to follow your heart.